The violent coughing fit struck just as Hope Kendall's wagon rolled over a sharp rock, the jolt sending her tumbling against the wooden side panel. Blood speckled her handkerchief, impossible to hide from the sharp eyes of Ezra Thompson, the wagon train's leader. Wyoming Territory, 1867, was no place for weakness, and Hope knew her time with the train was running short. "Miss Kendall has consumption." The shout came from Martha Wilkins, who had been eyeing Hope with suspicion since she joined the train in Independence, Missouri. "She'll kill us all before we reach Oregon." Hope's protests died in her throat as another coughing spasm racked her slender frame. She didn't have consumption tuberculosis, she was certain of it. The doctor in St. Louis had diagnosed her with pneumonia before she departed, assuring her it would clear with proper rest and medicine. But the grueling pace of the wagon train had only worsened her condition, and now her fate hung in the balance as the settlers' faces hardened with fear. "I ain't risking my family for one woman," declared Henry Olson, clutching his youngest daughter protectively to his chest. Ezra Thompson's weathered face showed no emotion as he delivered the verdict. "Miss Kendall, we cannot risk the health of the entire train. When we break camp tomorrow, you will not continue with us." "But that's a death sentence," Hope cried, her voice breaking. At 23, she'd already survived the loss of her entire family to influenza and the collapse of her father's business. This journey west was her last chance at a fresh start. "We'll leave you supplies," Thompson continued, unmoved. "Enough for a few days. Perhaps a westbound group will take pity." Hope knew what that meant. Alone in Indian Territory, she would likely perish from exposure or attack if her illness didn't claim her first. As dusk fell over the encampment, she sat beside her wagon, watching families prepare their evening meals, now keeping their distance from her. Not one person met her eyes, except one. Caleb Blackstone had been hired as a scout for the wagon train, his expertise in tracking and hunting making him invaluable to the group. He stood several yards away, his tall frame leaning against a tree, keen eyes watching the exchange. He'd never spoken much to Hope during their journey, but she'd noticed his quiet competence, the respect he commanded despite his youth of perhaps 28 years. As darkness settled over the plains, Hope prepared for what would likely be her last night with civilized company. She organized her meager supplies and tried to develop a plan, though her options were limited. The sound of approaching footsteps startled her. "Miss Kendall," Caleb's deep voice was soft, meant only for her ears. "I've seen pneumonia before. My sister had it when we were young." Hope looked up, surprised to find him standing so close. "Mr. Blackstone, I assure you I am not a danger to the train." "I believe you." He glanced toward Thompson's wagon, "but fear makes people unreasonable." "I cannot blame them entirely," Hope admitted, another cough rising in her throat. "They have children to protect." Caleb's eyes narrowed as he observed her pale complexion in the firelight. Without another word, he disappeared into the darkness, leaving Hope to wonder at his purpose. Dawn broke with a somber efficiency as the settlers prepared to continue their journey. Hope stood beside her belongings, a trunk, a small bag of food, and a canteen of water, the supplies Thompson had deemed sufficient. "We move out in 15 minutes, Thompson announced, avoiding Hope's gaze. She held back tears, determined to face her fate with dignity. The families busied themselves with final preparations, their backs turned to her as though she were already a ghost. "I won't be continuing with the train," a voice declared loudly. Heads turned as Caleb Blackstone stepped forward, leading his horse. Strapped to the animal's saddle were his rifle, several packs, and what appeared to be a medicine kit. "Blackstone, we need you," Thompson protested. "Who'll scout for us?" "Johnson knows these parts well enough. You'll manage." Caleb's tone left no room for argument. He moved to stand beside Hope. "I'm staying with Miss Kendall." Whispers erupted among the settlers. "You're throwing away your life for a dying woman?" Thompson asked incredulously. "She's not dying," Caleb stated firmly. "Not if I can help it. I've seen this illness before, and I have medicine that can help. My father was a doctor before he passed." Hope stared at him in disbelief. "Mr. Blackstone, I cannot allow you to sacrifice your future for my sake." He turned to her, his expression resolute. "It's my choice, Miss Kendall." Thompson approached them, lowering his voice. "Blackstone, be reasonable. Even if she recovers, you'll never catch up to us. Winter will be setting in before you reach Oregon." "Then we'll find somewhere to wait out the season," Caleb replied. "There's a settlement about 100 miles west, Monticello, Wyoming. We can make it there if we take it slow." Thompson sighed, recognizing the futility of arguing. "Your pay, then." He extended a small pouch of coins. "Keep it," Caleb said. "Just leave us the extra medicines from the supply wagon and one of the spare mules for Miss Kendall's belongings." An hour later, Hope watched as the wagon train disappeared over the horizon, the dust settling in their wake. She turned to find Caleb organizing their supplies. "Why?" she asked simply. "No one deserves to be left behind," he answered, securing her trunk to the mule. "Especially not for something that can be treated. And if I do have consumption after all," Hope pressed. Caleb's eyes met hers steadily. "Then at least you won't face it alone." He handed her a small glass bottle containing a dark liquid, willow bark and herbs. "It'll help with the fever and pain. We'll start with this, then move to stronger medicines as needed." Hope's fingers trembled as she accepted the medicine. "I don't know how I'll ever repay you." "Stay alive," he said, his voice gruff with emotion he seemed unused to expressing. "That'll be payment enough." Their journey began slowly, with Caleb insisting Hope ride his horse while he led them on foot. He limited their travel to mornings and late afternoons, avoiding the punishing midday heat. Each evening he prepared a campsite with meticulous care, creating as much comfort as possible for Hope's recovery. On their third night, Hope's fever spiked dangerously. She thrashed in her bedroll, delirious with visions of her deceased family and the terrors of being abandoned. Caleb sat by her side through the night, applying cool compresses to her forehead and neck. He administered stronger medicine from his supplies, measuring the doses with careful precision. "My father taught me," he explained when she questioned his medical knowledge during a lucid moment. "He was the only doctor for 100 miles in western Texas. I assisted him from the time I could walk." "Why didn't you become a doctor yourself?" Hope asked weakly. A shadow crossed his face. "After he was killed in a raid, I found I preferred the open country, less painful memories." He offered her water. "Try to sleep. The fever will break by morning if the medicine takes hold." Hope drifted in and out of consciousness, always waking to find Caleb vigilant beside her. Once, she thought she felt his calloused hand gently brushing hair from her face, but when she opened her eyes, he was across the fire, mixing more medicine. By dawn, the fever had indeed broken. Hope woke to find herself drenched in sweat but clear-headed for the first time in days. Caleb dozed against his saddle, his face relaxed in sleep, making him appear younger than his years. The morning sun illuminated the planes of his face, the strong jaw shadowed with stubble, the straight nose that had clearly been broken once, the dark lashes resting against tan cheeks. Hope realized with a start that he was handsome in a rugged, unpolished way, as if sensing her gaze, his eyes opened, instantly alert. "The fever's broken," he observed, studying her face. "Yes," Hope confirmed, attempting to sit up. "I feel much improved." "Good." He nodded, relief evident in his expression. "But we'll continue the medicine for at least another week. Pneumonia can return if not fully treated. They established a routine over the following days, traveling in the cooler hours, resting when the sun was highest. Caleb hunted for fresh meat and gathered edible plants to supplement their supplies. Hope's strength gradually returned, allowing her to take on small camp duties. On their 7th day alone, they encountered their first real danger. Caleb spotted the dust cloud of riders in the distance, immediately leading Hope and their animals into a rocky outcropping for cover. "Comanche," he whispered, his hand on his rifle. 5, maybe 6 riders. Hope's heart hammered in her chest as they pressed into the shadow of the rocks. Caleb positioned himself before her, his body a shield between her and potential threat. The riders passed within a quarter-mile of their hiding place, moving quickly, apparently focused on some other purpose. Only when they were well out of sight did Caleb relax his vigilance. "Were you afraid?" Hope asked that evening as they sat beside their small fire. "A fool wouldn't be," Caleb replied, cleaning his rifle with methodical care. "But fear keeps you alive if you use it right. You seemed so calm." He paused in his work. "I've had practice." After a moment, he added, "My mother and sister were killed by raiders when I was 15. Father and I survived because we were attending a birth in a neighboring homestead." Hope's chest tightened with sympathy. "I lost my parents and brothers to influenza last year. That's why I was traveling to Oregon. My uncle has a mercantile there." "I'm sorry," Caleb said simply, but the words carried genuine understanding. "It's why I couldn't bear being left behind," Hope admitted. Dying alone seemed worse than the illness itself. Caleb's eyes reflected the firelight as he regarded her across the flames. "You won't die, Miss Kendall, not if I have any say in the matter." "Hope," she said softly. "Please call me Hope. After all we've endured together, formality seems unnecessary." A smile, the first she'd seen from him, briefly transformed his serious features. "Hope," he repeated, as if testing the feel of her name. "Then I'm Caleb." The next morning, Hope woke without coughing for the first time in weeks. Her chest still ached when she took deep breaths, but the persistent tickle that had plagued her was noticeably diminished. "The medicine is working," Caleb confirmed when she shared the improvement. "We'll continue it until all symptoms are gone." Their journey to Monticello progressed steadily. Hope regained her strength enough to walk alongside Caleb for stretches, giving his horse a rest. During these walks, they began sharing stories of their lives before the wagon train. Hope spoke of growing up in Boston, the daughter of a successful merchant whose business had expanded west, until the illness that claimed her family had destroyed everything. Caleb described his childhood in Texas, learning medicine from his father and tracking from local hunters. "I never expected to find myself on this path," Hope confessed one afternoon as they rested beneath a cottonwood tree. "I always thought I'd marry a businessman like my father, have children, live in a fine house in the city." "And now?" Caleb asked, his keen eyes studying her. Hope considered the vastness of the landscape around them, so different from Boston's crowded streets. "Now I'm not certain of anything except that I'm grateful to be alive." Caleb nodded, understanding in his gaze. "The West changes people. It strips away pretense." "Is that why you love it?" Hope asked. "Despite its dangers, partly," he admitted. "Out here, a person is judged by their actions, not their family name or the cut of their clothes." He paused, then added quietly, "And the land has a beauty that gets under your skin." As if to illustrate his point, the setting sun painted the distant mountains with gold and crimson, the prairie grasses swaying in a gentle breeze. Hope found herself mesmerized by the sight and by the man beside her, whose profile was illuminated in the dying light. A strange warmth bloomed in her chest that had nothing to do with her illness. She turned away quickly, unsettled by the feeling. That night, a thunderstorm descended upon them with frightening speed. Rain lashed their hastily erected shelter, a crude lean-to Caleb had constructed using canvas from Hope's trunk. Huddled together in the small space, they listened to thunder rolling across the plains. "Will the animals be safe?" Hope asked, concerned for the horse and mule tethered nearby. "They'll be fine," Caleb assured her. "They're used to weather like this." A particularly loud crash of thunder made Hope jump, inadvertently pressing against Caleb's side. He stiffened momentarily, then relaxed, allowing his arm to rest against hers. "The storms pass quickly here," he said, his voice low. "Violent but brief." Hope nodded, acutely aware of his proximity. In Boston, such closeness with a man would have been scandalous. Here, in the wilderness, conventional rules seemed distant and unimportant compared to the reality of survival. Lightning illuminated the shelter, revealing Caleb's face just inches from hers. Their eyes met in that brief flash, and something unspoken passed between them, an acknowledgement of their unique situation, and the bond forming through shared hardship. When Hope woke the next morning, she found Caleb already up, rekindling their fire from the previous night's embers. The storm had passed, leaving the prairie washed clean, wildflowers nodding with droplets of rain. "How do you feel?" he asked, his standard morning question. "Better," she answered truthfully. "Stronger." He studied her face as if confirming her assessment. "Good. We should reach Monticello in about 5 days if we maintain our pace." 5 days. Hope was surprised to feel a twinge of regret at the thought of their journey ending. In the settlement, they would be thrust back into society, however rudimentary. Their time alone together would end. The day passed uneventfully as they traveled through rolling hills dotted with sagebrush and occasional stands of cottonwood trees. In the late afternoon, Caleb spotted a small herd of antelope grazing in a valley below their path. "Fresh meat would do you good," he said, retrieving his rifle. "Wait here." Hope watched as he moved downwind of the animals, his movements so fluid and silent that he seemed part of the landscape itself. He stalked the herd with patient precision, finally taking a clean shot that dropped a young buck instantly. That evening they feasted on fresh antelope meat, the rich protein a welcome change from their preserved rations. Hope felt her strength returning more rapidly, her body healing under Caleb's careful ministrations. "Tell me about Monticello," she requested as they sat by the fire. "What sort of place is it?" "Small but growing," Caleb replied. "About 30 permanent buildings last time I passed through. A general store, blacksmith, small hotel. They even have a doctor, an older man named Winters. He can check your lungs when we arrive." "And after Monticello," Hope ventured. "What then?" Caleb poked at the fire, sending sparks into the night sky. "That depends on your health and the season. If winter's closing in, we might need to stay until spring." Hope repeated, her heart quickening at the implication. Caleb looked up, his expression unreadable in the firelight. "Unless you prefer to continue alone." "No," she said quickly. I hadn't presumed you would stay with me once we reached civilization." He was silent for a long moment. "I don't abandon what I start, Hope." Something in his tone suggested he was speaking of more than just her recovery. Their journey continued through increasingly varied terrain as they approached the foothills of the mountains. Hope's health improved daily, her cough now rare and her energy returning. She found herself able to help more with camp duties and even began learning tracking skills from Caleb. "You have a natural eye for detail," he commented when she spotted rabbit tracks that he'd intentionally not mentioned. "Most city folk miss what's right before them." "Perhaps I'm not entirely a city person anymore," Hope replied with a small smile. On their 4th day after the thunderstorm, They crested a hill to find a pristine lake spread before them, its surface reflecting the blue sky and surrounding pines. "It's beautiful," Hope breathed. "And a good place to rest for the remainder of the day," Caleb decided. "The water will be cold but clean. We could both use a proper wash." They made camp near the shore, and Caleb tactfully retreated into the forest to hunt, giving Hope privacy to bathe. The cold water was shocking at first, but refreshing after weeks of travel with only cursory washing from their limited water supplies. Hope carefully unpinned her honey-brown hair, allowing it to fall loose down her back as she waded into deeper water. She quickly scrubbed her body and hair with the small piece of soap Caleb had provided from his supplies. Afterward, dressed in her cleanest remaining clothes, she sat on a sun-warmed rock to dry her hair. The sensation of being clean again lifted her spirits tremendously, making her feel more human than she had in weeks. When Caleb returned with 2 rabbits for their dinner, he paused at the edge of the clearing. Hope turned to greet him and was struck by the expression on his face as he took in her appearance, hair loose and gleaming in the sunlight, cheeks flushed from the cold water. "You look," he began, then cleared his throat. "You're looking healthier." "I feel reborn," Hope admitted, combing her fingers through her damp hair. "Thank you for suggesting this stop." Caleb nodded, his eyes lingering on her for a moment longer before he busied himself preparing the rabbits. After he'd set them to cook over the fire, he took his own turn bathing in the lake. Hope tried not to think of him in the water, focusing instead on mending a tear in her skirt. When he returned, his dark hair wet and his face freshly shaved with lake water, she found it difficult not to stare. Without the stubble that had covered his jaw for weeks, he looked younger, though no less rugged. "We should reach Monticello tomorrow," he announced as they ate their dinner. "Mid-afternoon, likely." Hope nodded, surprised again by her mixed feelings about reaching their destination. "What will you do once we're there?" she asked. "Will you seek work as a scout again?" Caleb considered the question. "Perhaps. Or I might see if there's need for someone with basic medical knowledge. Dr. Winters is getting on in years. You'd consider settling in one place?" Hope asked, remembering his earlier comments about preferring the open country. "A man's priorities can change," he replied cryptically, his eyes meeting hers across the fire. That night, Hope lay awake long after Caleb's breathing had deepened into sleep. Their journey together was ending, yet something else seemed to be beginning, something undefined but increasingly undeniable. The following day dawned clear and cool, a hint of autumn in the air despite the summer season. They packed camp efficiently, their movements now synchronized after weeks of traveling together. Hope noticed how they anticipated each other's needs without speaking, a wordless communication that had developed between them. By mid-morning, they spotted smoke from chimneys in the distant Monticello coming into view as they crested a gentle rise. The settlement was nestled in a valley, surrounded by fields where crops grew in neat rows. A creek wound through the town, and scattered buildings formed a main street with smaller structures radiating outward. "It's larger than I expected," Hope commented, taking in the bustling activity visible even from a distance. "It's grown," Caleb acknowledged. "Last time I passed through was nearly a year ago." As they approached the outskirts of town, Hope became acutely conscious of her appearance. Her dress, though clean from yesterday's washing, was worn from travel, and she knew her face was sun-browned from weeks outdoors. "You look fine," Caleb said quietly, reading her thoughts with uncanny accuracy. "Better than fine." Hope smiled gratefully at him as they entered the town proper. Curious glances followed them down the main street. Newcomers were clearly notable in a community this size. Caleb guided them toward a 2-story building with a sign proclaiming it the Monticello Hotel. We'll secure rooms first, he decided. Then find Dr. Winters. The hotel proprietor, a plump woman named Mrs. Holloway, greeted them with frank curiosity. Don't often get travelers this time of year, she remarked, eyeing them speculatively. Most wagon trains passed through months ago. We had to separate from our train, Caleb explained simply. Miss Kendall was ill and they couldn't delay their journey. Mrs. Holloway's expression softened. Poor dear. Well, I've 2 rooms available. Will you be staying long? Caleb glanced at Hope before answering. At least until Miss Kendall's fully recovered, perhaps longer depending on the winter. Wise decision, Mrs. Holloway nodded. Passes get treacherous by October. Now, rooms are 50 cents per night, meals included. I serve breakfast at 6, dinner at noon, and supper at 6 in the evening. After settling their belongings in their rooms, simple but clean spaces with real beds that seemed luxurious after weeks of sleeping on the ground, they sought out Dr. Winters. The doctor's office was a small building near the edge of town. The elderly physician welcomed them warmly, his rheumy eyes brightening with professional interest when Caleb explained Hope's condition and the treatment he'd administered. Your father taught you well, young man, Winters commented after examining Hope's lungs. The pneumonia is nearly cleared. Another week of the willow bark tea and she should be fully recovered. And the risk to others? Hope asked anxiously. The wagon train feared I had consumption. No, my dear, just a stubborn case of pneumonia likely brought on by the dust and hardship of the trail. The old doctor patted her hand. You're no danger to anyone. Relief washed over Hope. Though Caleb had assured her repeatedly of the same diagnosis, hearing it confirmed by a proper physician lifted a weight she hadn't realized she was still carrying. As they left the doctor's office, Caleb asked, Would you like to see the rest of the town? It's small enough to walk around before supper. Hope nodded eagerly, and they spent the afternoon exploring Monticello. The settlement boasted a general store, blacksmith shop, small church, schoolhouse, and several businesses including a dressmaker that caught Hope's eye. Perhaps tomorrow I might inquire about fabric, she mused. I should make myself something suitable for town life. Your uncle in Oregon, Caleb said suddenly. Will you still try to reach him come spring? The question caught Hope off guard. In the intensity of their journey, she had almost forgotten her original destination. I'm not certain, she admitted. He doesn't know I'm coming. The plan was formed hastily after my parents died. Caleb nodded thoughtfully, but didn't press further. That evening in the hotel dining room, they attracted considerable attention from the other guests and townspeople who had come for the well-regarded supper service. Mrs. Holloway had clearly spread word of their arrival, and several people stopped by their table to introduce themselves. Friendly folk, Caleb observed after the town's mayor, a portly man named Harrison, had finished welcoming them effusively. Very, Hope agreed, somewhat overwhelmed by the attention after weeks of isolation. Though I feel like an exhibit at a museum, Caleb chuckled, a rare sound that warmed Hope more than the hot meal before her. New faces are entertainment in places like this. They'll lose interest soon enough. One introduction proved particularly significant. Sarah Miller, the town's schoolteacher, approached their table with purpose in her stride. Miss Kendall, she began without preamble, Mrs. Holloway mentioned you're from Boston and educated. Is that correct? Hope nodded, surprised. Yes, I attended Brighton Ladies' Seminary. Sarah's face brightened. Wonderful, you see, I'm in quite a predicament. I'm expecting my first child, she gestured to her slightly rounded belly, and will need to step away from teaching after Christmas. The town council has been fretting about finding a replacement, even temporarily. Would you consider the position, at least until spring? Hope blinked in astonishment. I've never taught formally. But you're educated, which is more than most here can claim. The children are eager learners, 26 in total, ages 6 to 16. Sarah leaned closer. The pay is $30 a month plus a room behind the schoolhouse if you want it. Hope glanced at Caleb, who watched the exchange with interest. It's a generous offer, he commented, and would give you time to consider your longer-term plans. The decision formed in Hope's mind with surprising clarity. I would be honored to help, Mrs. Miller. Sarah beamed. Wonderful. Come by the schoolhouse tomorrow and I'll show you everything. After she departed, Hope sat in mild shock. I seem to have secured employment without even trying. The West is like that, Caleb said with a small smile. Opportunities find those willing to grasp them. After a pause, he added, it seems you have reason to stay in Monticello beyond your recovery. It appears so, Hope agreed, studying his expression. And you? Will you move on once I'm settled? The question hung between them, weighted with unspoken implications. Caleb's eyes held her steadily. I told you, Hope, I don't abandon what I start. The following weeks brought significant changes for both of them. Hope began assisting Sarah Miller at the schoolhouse, learning the curriculum and becoming acquainted with the children she would soon teach independently. The work was challenging but deeply satisfying, giving her a sense of purpose she had lacked since her family's death. Caleb, meanwhile, found his own place in the community. Dr. Winters, impressed by his medical knowledge, offered him an apprenticeship of sorts. The aging physician had been seeking someone to eventually take over his practice, and Caleb's background made him an ideal candidate. It would honor your father's legacy, Winters told him. And frankly, these old bones won't last forever. Monticello needs a doctor who can ride out to the distant homesteads when needed. The offer resonated with something deep in Caleb's spirit, a calling he had denied himself after his father's death. Hope watched the transformation in him with wonder as he began spending his days at the doctor's office, returning to the hotel in the evenings with a new light in his eyes. You were meant for this, she told him one evening as they walked along the creek after supper, a habit they had developed. I can see it in the way you speak of the work. Perhaps, Caleb admitted. I ran from it for so long, it's strange to find myself circling back. Not strange, Hope disagreed. It's a gift to find your true path. Caleb stopped walking, turning to face her in the fading light. If not for you falling ill, I might never have found my way here. If not for you staying behind, I wouldn't be alive to see it, Hope countered softly. The air between them seemed to thicken with unspoken words. Caleb took a half-step closer, his hand lifting as if to touch her face, then dropping away as voices approached other townsfolk out for an evening stroll. The moment broke, but something had shifted between them. Hope felt it as surely as she felt the cooling autumn air against her skin. As September gave way to October, Hope moved from the hotel to the small room behind the schoolhouse, saving her modest salary for future needs. The space was simple but cozy, with a bed, table, 2 chairs, and a small cook-stove. A pair of windows looked out over a kitchen garden that had been planted by previous teachers. Caleb remained at the hotel, though he visited Hope frequently, often bringing small gifts, a book from the general store, wildflowers gathered during his rides with Dr. Winters to outlying farms, once a length of blue ribbon that matched her eyes exactly. Each gesture deepened the connection between them, though neither spoke openly of their feelings. There was an unspoken agreement to move slowly, to allow their relationship to develop naturally amid their new lives in Monticello. The town observed their growing closeness with approving interest. Mrs. Holloway, in particular, took a maternal interest in their situation. That young man watches you like you hung the moon, dearie, she told Hope one day when Caleb was out with the doctor. "Never seen a more devoted fellow." Hope blushed, uncertain how to respond. "We've been through much together." "Hardship either binds people or breaks them apart," Mrs. Holloway said wisely. "Seems clear which way it went for you too." In mid-October, Hope officially took over the classroom as Sarah's condition made standing all day too difficult. The children had already accepted Hope, her patient teaching style and genuine interest in their progress winning their respect. On her first day as their full teacher, she found a small wooden carving on her desk, a miniature schoolhouse, exquisitely detailed. No note accompanied it, but she knew immediately it was from Caleb. That evening, when he came to walk with her after supper, she thanked him. "It's beautiful. When did you find time to make it?" "Evenings," he admitted. "It helps me think, working with my hands." "You have many talents, Caleb Blackstone," Hope said softly. "Dr. Tracker Carver." "I'm still learning the most important one," he replied, his voice low. "And what's that?" "How to tell a woman what's in my heart." Hope's breath caught. They had stopped walking, standing beneath a large cottonwood tree whose leaves rustled gold and crimson in the evening breeze. "Perhaps you could practice," she suggested, her heart pounding. Caleb stepped closer, close enough that she could see the flecks of gold in his hazel eyes. "Hope," he began, his voice rough with emotion. "When I stayed behind with you, I thought I was just doing what was right. I didn't expect." He paused, searching for words. "I didn't expect to find someone who would change everything for me." Hope remained silent, afraid to break the spell of the moment. "You've given me a reason to stop wandering," Caleb continued. "A reason to build something lasting." His hand reached up, hesitantly touching her cheek. "If you'll have me, I want to court you properly. Here in Monticello, or wherever you choose to go." "I'm not going anywhere," Hope whispered, leaning slightly into his touch. "Not without you." The kiss, when it came, was gentle, a question as much as an answer. Hope responded with the certainty she felt in her heart, her hands coming to rest lightly on his chest. When they parted, Caleb's expression was one of wonder and resolve. "I've never been good with words," he admitted, "but I'll try to show you every day what you mean to me." "Actions speak clearly enough," Hope assured him, thinking of all he had already done, saving her life, supporting her recovery, encouraging her new path. Their courtship proceeded with the blessing of the entire town. Dr. Winters was particularly delighted, seeing in Caleb not only a successor but a young man finding happiness after years of lonely wandering. The old physician shared stories of Caleb's father with Hope, painting a picture of the man who had shaped Caleb's early years. Harold Blackstone was a fine doctor and a better man, Winters told her one afternoon when she visited the medical office. His son has that same quality of caring beneath the tough exterior. The boy had to grow up too fast after losing his mother and sister, but the foundation was solid. Hope treasured these insights, understanding better the man she was growing to love more deeply each day. For his part, Caleb seemed to blossom under her affection, his natural reserve giving way to a quiet confidence as their relationship deepened. As winter approached, bringing shorter days and colder nights, Hope and Caleb fell into comfortable routines. They shared Sunday dinners at the hotel, walked together each evening weather permitted, and spent quiet hours in Hope's small quarters, reading or simply talking about their days. The first snowfall came in early November, transforming Monticello into a winter wonderland. The schoolchildren were wildly excited, their energy barely containable as they watched white flakes accumulate outside the schoolhouse windows. "Very well," Hope conceded with a laugh after their attention had been completely lost. "You may have 10 minutes to play in the snow, then we continue our arithmetic." Their cheers nearly raised the roof as they tumbled outside in a chaotic rush. Hope followed more sedately, wrapping her shawl tightly around her shoulders. She watched with amusement as the children immediately began constructing snowballs and rudimentary forts. So absorbed was she in their antics that she didn't notice Caleb approaching until he was beside her on the schoolhouse steps. "I thought doctors were too dignified for midday visits," she teased, pleased by his unexpected appearance. "Dr. Winters insisted I check on the schoolteacher," he replied with mock seriousness. "There are concerns she might relapse in this cold weather." Hope laughed. "Is that your professional opinion, Mr. Almost Dr. Blackstone?" "Indeed." His eyes crinkled with humor. "I prescribe a proper coat for outdoor supervision." He held out a package wrapped in brown paper. "Fortunately, I happen to have the remedy with me." Hope unwrapped the parcel with curious fingers, gasping when she revealed a beautiful woolen coat in deep blue. "Caleb, this is too extravagant." "No, it's not," he disagreed firmly. "Winter here is no joke. Besides, Dr. Winters has started paying me a small wage." Hope ran her hand over the fine wool. "It's beautiful, thank you." Caleb helped her into the coat, his hands lingering briefly on her shoulders. "It suits you," he said softly. A well-aimed snowball suddenly hit Caleb squarely in the back, interrupting the moment. They turned to find young Tommy Wilson looking mortified at his accuracy. "Sorry, Mr. Blackstone," the boy called, clearly expecting retribution. To the children's delight and Hope's amusement, Caleb merely grinned, bent to scoop up snow, and returned fire with remarkable precision. Within moments, he was engaged in a full snowball battle, the children shrieking with laughter as the usually serious medical apprentice joined their play. Hope watched, her heart swelling with affection. This was a side of Caleb she had glimpsed only rarely playful, unburdened by the past. As if feeling her gaze, he looked up, his face flushed with cold and exertion, eyes bright with happiness. In that moment, Hope knew with absolute certainty that she loved him. Winter settled fully over Monticello, bringing with it holiday preparations and a sense of community that warmed Hope despite the plunging temperatures. The schoolhouse closed for 2 weeks around Christmas, giving her time to assist with town festivities and reflect on the remarkable changes in her life over the past months. On Christmas Eve, the entire town gathered in the church for a special service, followed by a community supper in the adjacent meeting hall. Hope wore her blue coat and a new dress she had made from fabric purchased with her teaching wages. As she entered the church beside Caleb, she felt a sense of belonging she had thought lost forever after her family's deaths. The service was simple but moving, filled with candles and familiar carols that brought tears to Hope's eyes. Beside her, Caleb sang in a surprisingly pleasant baritone, his shoulder warm against hers in the crowded pew. Afterward, at the community supper, they were separated as Hope helped serve food, and Caleb was drawn into conversation with several of the local farmers, who had come to respect his medical knowledge. Hope watched him from across the room, noting how naturally he had integrated into the community that had welcomed them both. "He'll make a fine husband," Mrs. Holloway commented, appearing beside Hope with uncanny timing. "When's he planning to make it official, dear?" Hope blushed. "We haven't discussed marriage, Mrs. Holloway." The older woman raised a skeptical eyebrow. "Then that man is slower than I gave him credit for. Anyone with eyes can see you two are meant for each other." Before Hope could respond, Mayor Harrison called for attention, announcing it was time for the gift exchange. Each person had brought a small gift to be randomly distributed, a tradition that ensured everyone received something regardless of their means. Hope had contributed a set of handkerchiefs she had carefully embroidered with different wildflowers. Caleb, she knew, had carved several small animals similar to the schoolhouse he had made for her. The distribution proceeded amid much laughter and exclamation. Hope received a lovely knitted scarf in cream wool, while Caleb was given a leather-bound journal. As the formal exchange concluded and people began mingling again, Caleb made his way to Hope's side. "I have something else for you," he said quietly. "Would you walk with me for a moment?" Curious, Hope followed him outside. The night was clear and bitterly cold, stars blazing overhead with incredible brilliance. Their breath formed white clouds as they stood on the church steps. "It's freezing," Hope laughed. "What could possibly require braving this cold?" Caleb smiled, but there was nervousness in his expression. "I wanted privacy for this." He reached into his pocket, withdrawing a small object. "This was my mother's. My father gave it to me before he died, saying I should give it to the woman who captured my heart as completely as she had captured his." He opened his palm to reveal a ring, a simple gold band with a single small pearl. Hope's breath caught, her heart suddenly racing. "Hope Kendall," Caleb said, his voice steady despite the emotion evident in his eyes. "When you were cast out from the wagon train, I thought I was saving your life. I didn't realize you would end up saving mine in an entirely different way." He took her gloved hand in his. "You've brought purpose and joy back into my existence. I love you with everything I am, and I want to build a life with you. Will you marry me?" Tears sprang to Hope's eyes, freezing almost instantly on her lashes. "Yes," she whispered, then louder. "Yes, Caleb, I love you too." His face transformed with joy as he slipped off her glove and placed the ring on her finger. It fit perfectly, as if meant for her all along. Then he pulled her into his arms, his kiss warming her despite the frigid air. When they finally returned inside, their news spread quickly through the gathering. Congratulations surrounded them, along with knowing smiles from those like Mrs. Holloway, who had seen the inevitability of their union long before they had acknowledged it themselves. The following months passed in a whirlwind of preparation and anticipation. Hope continued teaching, while Caleb took on more responsibilities at the medical practice, as Dr. Winters experienced increasing difficulty with his rheumatism. They decided to marry in April, when spring would be returning to the high country. Dr. Winters offered them the use of his second home, a small but comfortable house near his medical office that he had built for his wife before her passing years earlier. "It needs a family in it," the elderly doctor insisted when they protested his generosity. "Consider it my investment in Monticello's future health care." The winter was harsh but passed without major incident. Hope's pneumonia showed no signs of returning, her body now strong and fully recovered. Caleb thrived in his medical role, earning the respect of even the most skeptical farmers and ranchers in the region. Their wedding day dawned clear and mild, the first truly warm day of the season. The entire town turned out for the ceremony in the small church, which had been decorated with early spring flowers gathered by Hope's students. Hope wore a dress of ivory silk ordered specially from Denver, the finest garment she had owned since leaving Boston. Sarah Miller, now mother to a healthy baby boy, had arranged Hope's honey-brown hair with sprigs of wildflowers. Caleb waited at the altar in a new suit, his face solemn until Hope appeared at the church entrance. The smile that transformed his features then was worth every hardship they had endured to reach this moment. The ceremony was simple but deeply meaningful. They exchanged vows they had written themselves, promises that acknowledged the unusual path that had brought them together and their commitment to the future they would build. "From illness came healing," Hope said softly, holding Caleb's hands in hers. "From abandonment came belonging. I promise to walk beside you through whatever joys and sorrows life brings, with the same courage and devotion you showed when you chose to stay behind with me. I promise to cherish every day as the gift it is, Caleb responded, his voice steady though his eyes shone with emotion. To honor the trust you've placed in me, to build our home and life with love, and to never take for granted the miracle that brought you into my life. Their kiss as husband and wife sealed these promises, witnessed by the community that had embraced them both. The celebration afterward lasted well into the evening, with dancing, feasting, and countless toasts to their happiness. When they finally entered their new home as husband and wife, Caleb paused at the threshold. Without warning, he swept Hope into his arms, carrying her inside with a tenderness that brought fresh tears to her eyes. "Welcome home, Mrs. Blackstone," he whispered, setting her gently on her feet in their small parlor. "It has a beautiful sound," Hope replied, reaching up to touch his face. "Almost as beautiful as knowing I'll wake beside you every morning." The love they shared that night was a culmination of months of deepening connection, of learning each other's hearts and minds. In the privacy of their bedroom, they discovered each other fully at last, their bodies expressing what words could only begin to convey. Spring bloomed into full summer, and with it came news that Dr. Winters was officially retiring, leaving his practice entirely in Caleb's capable hands. The town council formally appointed Caleb as Monticello's physician, providing a stable income that allowed them to begin planning for their future with confidence. Hope continued teaching, finding deep satisfaction in watching her students' progress. By mutual agreement, she would finish the school year before considering whether to continue or focus on starting their family. That decision was made for them in late August, when Hope discovered she was expecting their first child. The news filled Caleb with a mixture of joy and protective concern that Hope found endearing. "I'm not ill this time," she reassured him as he insisted on examining her thoroughly. "This is the natural order of things, Dr. Blackstone." "Humor me," he replied, his hand gently pressing against her still flat abdomen. "I nearly lost you once before I even knew what you would mean to me. Now that I know, I couldn't bear it." Hope covered his hand with hers. "You saved my life so thoroughly that now we're creating a new one." "There's poetry in that, don't you think?" Caleb's smile was answer enough. Their son was born the following April, a healthy boy with his father's hazel eyes and his mother's determined spirit. They named him Daniel, after Hope's father, with Harold as his middle name to honor Caleb's. As Hope nursed their infant son in the rocking chair Caleb had crafted during the winter evenings of her pregnancy, she often reflected on the extraordinary journey that had brought them to this moment. From the terror of being abandoned by the wagon train to the joy of holding their child every step, even the painful ones, had been necessary to create the life they now shared. Caleb found her thus one evening, lost in thought as she gazed down at their sleeping son. He knelt beside the rocking chair, one hand gently stroking the baby's dark hair, the other resting on Hope's knee. "What are you thinking about so intently?" he asked. "How close I came to never knowing this happiness," Hope replied honestly. "If you hadn't stayed behind that day." "I had no choice," Caleb said simply. "Something beyond my understanding knew I needed to be there with you. Divine intervention, or simply the best decision I ever made." He leaned up to kiss her softly. "Either way, I'm grateful every day." 2 years after Daniel's birth, their family expanded again with the arrival of twin girls, Elizabeth and Margaret. Caleb's medical practice thrived, as did Monticello itself, growing into a respectable town with a small hospital that he helped establish. Hope eventually returned to teaching part-time as the children grew, finding balance between her professional satisfaction and the family she cherished. Together, they built a life rich with purpose, community, and abiding love. On the 10th anniversary of the day they had been left behind by the wagon train, Caleb and Hope took their children on a special picnic. They rode several miles outside town to a meadow filled with wildflowers, the same species that had dotted the prairie where Caleb had first treated Hope's fever. As the children played nearby, Caleb and Hope sat side by side, hands intertwined, watching the clouds drift across the Wyoming sky. "You ever wonder what happened to the others from the wagon train?" Hope asked. "If they made it safely to Oregon." "Sometimes," Caleb admitted. "Though I've never regretted not being with them." Hope squeezed his hand. "Nor have I. Being thrown away turned out to be the greatest blessing of my life." "Mine as well," Caleb agreed, drawing her close against his side. "Though I prefer to think of it as being set free to find where we truly belonged." Their eyes met in perfect understanding as Daniel called for them to see the butterfly he had discovered. Together, they rose to join their children, moving forward into the future they had built from what once seemed like the end of all hope, a future neither could have imagined when a frightened young woman was left behind, and a determined young man chose to stay.